If you're listening to this podcast, it means you're searching for someone who understands you, someone who gets you. You are yearning to be understood and to belong. Welcome to the Someone Gets Me podcast, where we help smart, talented, and sensitive people navigate an often insensitive world. I am Dianne A, your host. My roles as ambassador, author, speaker, and intuitive mentor for bright and talented people are woven into each episode. I have the experience and knowledge to educate and inspire, as I have been there and I understand your unique intensities, sensitivities, and challenges. Welcome. How to support gifted introverts in a team setting. Hi friends, it's Dianne here with Someone Gets Me, and today we're talking about introverts who are gifted in a team setting, whether the team is your family, your work cohort, colleagues, or just generally people in your world, because we all are on teams in different ways, not just officially in the corporate world or the sports world. And gifted people are often very introverted. Now, there's a lot of extroverted gifted people. A lot of gifted people are introverts. And an introvert replenishes themselves, obviously, by going within, where an extrovert is without and around people. And so sometimes introverts can get misunderstood or get lost in the shuffle of the extroverted world. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how do you support that gifted introvert in your world and on your team. And number one on this is to respect their pace. An introvert sometimes will take in all the information and then they will say whatever they need to say or do whatever they need to do. They're not necessarily going to be the chatty ones, the ones raising their hands first, always talking. They might be the people who are deeply listening and then will process and have something to say. So a lot of times I've been in team meetings where I am the introvert and people are going and talking and it's great and I'm following it and I either agree or don't, whatever, and they just keep on going, even if I'm wanting to talk, because I'm not an extrovert. And so I've learned how to kind of insert myself, right? But not all introverts know how to insert themselves into the extroverted world. So we want to practice paying attention to their pace and their space, right? So if you're the leader of the team and you notice you have some introverts on your team and they're not necessarily talking a lot, invite them to speak. Like, what do you think? Or do you have anything you'd like to add to this discussion? And then respect what they say, right? The point is that we need to allow that space. We need to allow the permission for an introverted person to come into the conversation and to show up, because introversions can sometimes get walked right over by an extroverted world unknowingly. It's not on purpose necessarily. It's more about the fact that it's two different ways of processing the world. So that's number one. Number two is to support writing. Sometimes gifted people, especially if you're neurodivergent, too many things at one time, background noise and people talking and things going on can yield a little bit of overwhelm, right? So sometimes it's really important to have things in writing, like send an email or ask your introverted teammate, how do you want to communicate about these work things, about these family things, about social settings, right? Like sometimes if somebody just gives me a bunch of verbal information, I can retain a lot of it. And sometimes after a period of time with a lot of other chaos in the world, I may not remember it exactly the way it was intended. So writing helps gifted people track and stay with it. And in fact, I think sometimes that really helps all of us. The world is so full of things that keep us distracted that, sometimes that writing helps us really ground ourselves, right? And have ourselves be more successful in our team settings. The next thing we want to do is I wrote notes here, highlight our strengths, right? Here's what introverts do. They listen really well and they deeply listen. And a lot of introverts, especially if they have any intuitive ability, will listen to what's not being said. Just yesterday, I was speaking with one of my clients and he was sharing something. And I could hear something that was going on with him that wasn't in his language. It was in his energy, the way he was speaking, his voice tone. And so when he was done with telling me what was happening, and then he asked for my input, I said, let me check out something. It seems like you're wanting to say, but I'm hearing it, but it's not really in the words. And so he said, okay. And after asking permission, I told him what I was sensing from what he didn't say, but I could feel. And he goes, you're spot on. You're right. Because sometimes introverted people, and I think all people in a way, can not always say the words, right? It's sometimes what's not being said, the feeling, the energy, the vibe, the language that's being used. And as an introvert myself, I'm able to deeply listen and use my intuitive ability to kind of fill in those holes and help the people I'm working with really move themselves forward or move themselves toward the goal that they have. In a team setting, in the work environments that I work with, and in the groups of people working together, that's a really important skill set. Introverts are very good at it. So sometimes your introverted, gifted people will have a sense, an understanding, a way of looking at what's going on with the team or the conversation that somebody who's not paying attention on that level may not see. So it adds depth, it adds extra kind of fluid viewing understanding to things. And so we want to acknowledge that all of the members have great value, and being able to deeply listen and see things differently than others is an asset. It's not a liability, it's an asset, right? We also want to understand that a lot of introverts are very good at critical thinking. Now, back when I was in school, which seems like so long ago, elementary school even, we were taught about critical thinking. It was reinforced in junior high school, and college that we wanted to learn critical thinking. And I remember when I was really young and I heard the phrase critical thinking, I'm like, well, I don't want to criticize anybody. But then I learned what it meant. As we know, critical thinking is all about being able to discern and understand and see things for what they are, whether it's true or not true, or what's the source, and to be able to keep going forward in a way where we can see the picture without a whole lot of bias, right? That's what critical thinking is. So introverts who are gifted are really good at critical thinking skills. Why would you think that? Because we are good at sitting back and listening and paying attention to what's being said, what's not being said, and the overall feel of things. And in that, we can critically think through situations. So often, when I'm trying to work through something in my own life, I find my intuitive, gifted, introverted friends and say, what do you all think about this? Or what about this for the business? I'm thinking about this kind of program, or I'm wondering about that. Because there's a different level of listening and critical thinking that we will find with those people because they're introverted and gifted. So it's a skill set, it's a natural ability that is really useful, and it's really good on teams. So if you only have one introverted person on your team, you got to make sure you're paying attention, because that person might get overlooked and there could be valuable information in that. Now, if you're the gifted person, if you're the introverted gifted person on that team, you want to learn how to step in and insert yourself into the situation so that you can make the impact you're meant to make. And the other thing I want to talk about is inviting an introvert into the conversation, into the decision making. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I really think it's important to think about this for a moment. If we're in a fast-paced, extroverted world that's full of overwhelm and overstimulus, a lot of gifted people also have ADHD or maybe have some neurodivergence where that overwhelm is difficult to handle, especially for long periods. So by respecting space and paying attention to writing and doing the things I'm talking about here, your introverted, gifted person on your team can thrive. We want to directly seek their opinion. Ask them specifically, what do you think about this? And then here's the key. Wait for their response. because sometimes people process and then speak. So if you say, well, what do you think, Diane? And then you keep on going and there's very little window of opportunity for response, many gifted people won't respond, or they'll learn over time to just give you one or two words because there's not enough opening. So sometimes it takes paying attention to our pace. Fast isn't always better. Bigger isn't always better. Sometimes it's honoring the pace of all the different people involved in whatever group we're in. And the last thing I want to talk about, I think, is probably the most important, probably should have mentioned it first, is psychological safety. Creating safety so that a gifted person, an introverted person can speak without the fear of retribution, harm, being made fun of, or bullied, where the people are psychologically safe to share their views, their ideas, especially when they're solicited, even if it's not the common way, even if it's something divergent from what other people are saying, or even if it's a question that seems to come out of left field but really isn't. I have a really amazing client right now, and she's really good, and she's able to see things in her team and her work team especially, and she'll ask questions that are deep and profound. And often the people she's asking the questions to have never heard that question before, and maybe themselves didn't even think about it. So since I've known her, she's been bullied, she's been made fun of, and she's also been honored and respected for the fact that she can ask deeper questions and see things from angles that others do not have. They don't see it that way. So the introverted, gifted people often have a different vantage point, a different understanding. So creating psychological safety where the fear of retribution is not present and the person's invited in and supported and honored, right, for what they bring to the table, just like all the other colleagues who are extroverted or maybe gifted and maybe not gifted. It's honoring everybody so that everybody is safe, so that bullying or making fun of or dismissing, all of those things are not a healthy part of a good team. So if your team has a lot of that, then right out of the gate, we need to do some work on those things. And that's the things I do with different teams. But I think that psychological safety is really important because without it, it's hard for anyone to speak up. And without it, your gifted, introverted teammates could be really quiet. They could have the solution to the very thing you're trying to solve, but without the permission to be fully present and invited into the situation and their deep thinking honored and at least taken care of in that psychological safety way, you could miss it because you have a valuable person on your team who is introverted and gifted. If you are the introverted gifted one, or there's more than one of you on the team, it's really important, I believe, that we step up, that we say who we are and where we're headed, and that we let our voice be heard, even when we're shaking a little bit or even when we're nervous. That's why the safety is so important. So, the end of this episode, I want to remind you that all people have great value on your team. Gifted people, non-gifted people, neurodivergent people, neurotypical people. A great team is made up of lots of different ways of thinking and processing, people with different autobiographies and different intense sensitivities, because it is the constellation, the collaboration, the bringing together, the synthesis of all of these great talents and all of these amazing skill sets. That's what makes your team magnificent. Everybody being the same, doing all the things, sitting in the little boxes, doesn't make for a great team. It just makes for a bunch of people following the same thing. So let's practice, everybody, right? Bringing ourselves to really appreciate all people, not just the gifted people, not the neurotypical people. I have some gifted people I work with who are judgmental, and I really work on, let's not do that. Everybody has value. Everybody brings something important to the table. The introverts sometimes need a little bit of help in an extroverted world. And you extroverts, sometimes it takes a little bit of skill and a little bit of understanding to do things a bit differently in order to invite in those people who might need a little bit more of a nudge. So I hope this episode of Someone Gets Me has served you well, and I hope it has reminded you of some things that are really important, like deep listening and psychological safety, and honoring everybody on your team. If you have any questions, or as always, if you want to speak to me about this or any other topic, in the show notes, you will find the way to reach me to do a get to know you call. And I'm happy to get on Zoom and talk to you and see what we can come up with a really nice, exciting conversation. And so the next episode of Someone Gets Me, put your face to the sun and so the shadows fall behind you, because you are a rock star. You're here on purpose with a mighty purpose. And so I want you to go out there, put your face to that sun, go be who you're meant to be, light your inner fire. And remember, you're beautiful, you're lovable, and you're capable. Until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, this is Dianne saying, be well. Are you tired of searching for someone to understand you? Join our Facebook group, Someone Gets Me. In this group, you will be able to connect with others who are intense, sensitive, smart, and talented. I share my insights and teachings, and you can connect with others in a real, authentic, safe forum. So join us today. Someone Gets Me.